On today's show, just 12 days left until the San Diego Padres opening game against the Dodgers, and everyone's still wondering, what the heck is the starting pitching rotation going to look like? We're going to be going over not just the top 3 cemented guys, but also the back-end candidates that make the most sense, from guys like Pedro Avila and Matt Waldron to prospects like Robby Snelling and Jairo Iriarte, and many more. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Padres, your daily San Diego Padres podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another edition of Locked On Padres podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day for Friday, March 8th. As always, and as you can tell, your host with sometimes, occasionally, but certainly, as you can tell from this intro, not always the most, Javier Reyes. You can follow me on Twitter at Javapeno, that's JAVIIPENO, or at LO_Padres. I will start to use my main account soon, more for baseball as we creep up to opening day, because I like using my main account when we're talking about Padres stuff, at least for the memes and the fun stuff. The other account I use to just give like live game recaps and all that stuff. You can also check out the YouTube Locked On Padres if you want to see my sick jacket. I've already received plenty of compliments on this thing from you listeners and commenters. So feel free, just continue. I know it's bad. I know it's good. But I still like to hear it anyway. So go check that out, guys. Today's episode, we are going to be talking about the Padres rotation, finally. Something that I've neglected, frankly, to talk about, because I think that it's a little bit complicated this year, because there isn't really a lot of surefire things outside the top 3 guys. And I think that with all the trades, with the losing Blake Snell, with the many farm arms that are available that potentially could be called up, that a lot of people are excited about, like, this is a genuinely fascinating topic. And I actually think that the Padres rotation is a little bit underrated, similar to last year. And I want to give everybody just some confidence. Remember, last year there were also questions about the Padres starting pitching rotation. Everyone was like, I mean, yeah, Snell and Musgrove and Darvish are good, I guess, but like, what are you going to do with Martin? Like, what is going to happen? And then what happened? Lugo and Michael Wacha came in and were very, very effective for the team. So I want to give up. And there's a bunch of reasons that I want to give up aside from just that. So before we get into that, though, guys, let me just tell you, go check out FanDuel. Today's episode is brought to you by them. Make every moment more. New customers, join today, and you'll get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. And to get started with today's episode, let's start with the top, right? With the Padres rotation, whether or not this is going to be an effective rotation, certainly a lot of it is going to come down to the top 3. Don't get me wrong. The back end of the rotation is key, especially over the course of the season. This isn't just about playoffs. If it's just about playoffs, look, the top 3 on the Padres is perfectly fine. You can absolutely win with it. But in terms of getting through the season, there are questions, because 2 of the top 3 guys, Michael King and Yu Darvish, are both guys that have had some injury questions. And in fairness, that's basically the only question that I have about them. We've talked about Michael King a lot this offseason, kind of being the centerpiece of the Juan Soto trade, slots in as the Padres' number 3 starter. I actually think has some decent upside, and since 2022, like I've said many times, 2.6 ERA, 30% strikeout rate. This guy has the stuff. Now, the question is going to be health, right? That is absolutely going to be the thing. But considering that he pitched really well for the Yankees, I actually kind of trust this trade, because it's actually not very easy to pitch for the Yankees. Forget the ballpark and Yankee Stadium being more of a hitter-friendly environment. The fact that he's been effective for New York, I think, is always impressive to me. And I know that that's not like a super analytical thing. I know, I get it, but I still do give credence to that, because it's hard. Have you ever been to Yankee Stadium? I live on the East Coast. Those fans are lunatics. All of his baseball savant stuff looks great. The only thing is, I wish he could maybe get a little bit of a more higher ground ball rate from guys, but nonetheless, he is a strikeout artist. Like I said, 30% strikeout rate since 2022, and last year at 29.5, and it's not like he's doing that at the cost of control. He's got some pretty good control too. It all depends on health. And the same thing is the case for Darvish, who, if you told me we're getting healthy Darvish and that wouldn't be a problem, I wouldn't be surprised if he's great this year. Every time you count out Yu Darvish, he seems to bounce back, and that's what I like about him. On top of the fact that he's a famous tinkerer, great work ethic, I think a really great clubhouse guy to have around there too, especially with a team right now that has so many young pitchers and so many guys vying for that last rotation spot or even the bullpen. I think that that's great. And Darvish, again, he looked good in his first spring training start. I wouldn't count out, for a guy as meticulous as him, and ignoring for the stats for a second, I wouldn't count out the possibility for a guy who's known with tinkering and adding a new pitch every other offseason practically, right? That's what it feels like. I wouldn't count out the possibility that not just the health, but the weird way he started off the season last year, because he was in the World Baseball Classic. He got a little bit lit up, by the way, in that game, I believe against the, what was it, United States, right? Yeah, for the final. That he got a little bit lit up. Everyone was like, yeah, we don't know. It feels like there was some bad vibes and mojo for the Padres from the beginning when it came to Darvish's health. But if he's healthy, guys, he can still be effective. In fact, even when he probably wasn't healthy last year, he was still effective. The problem is that he wasn't Yu Darvish. And last year he was giving the type of value that if he was like your 4, then you would be thrilled with. You know what I mean? He wasn't very effective last year, like I said. The strikeout rate went down, which is okay, but the walk rate went up. He lost a little bit of his control that made him so effective the previous year. 4.8% walk rate to 7.3% this last year. So hopefully he can get that down. But if you go by some expected stats, 4.55 ERA, expected ERA of 3.82. So I think he was a little bit better and got a little bit unlucky. But even still, he was able to eat innings. The big thing with him, though, is going to be limiting some of the hard contact. That's something that he did really well with in 2022 as he ages, right? He had really good control and limited some of the hard contact to an extent, and just be able to be consistent and not give up any of those big hits, especially as he gets older and now going to be 37 years old. I still think Darvish can be awesome. He's one of my favorite pitchers to watch. Has been one of my favorite pitchers to watch, dare I say, ever in my life. I mean, he's up there in terms of, like, there's some relievers that I love watching, from Diaz, you know, of the Mets because of his intro and that he's Puerto Rican and all that, to Mike Mussina when I was a little bit younger, to guys like CC Sabathia when he was on other teams, and out dueling the Yankees when he was with the Guardians, stuff like that. Like, there's been a lot of pitchers. I love watching Darvish pitch, so I'm really rooting for him. I still think he can be effective. Question is how effective, and the question is health. And then the last guy is Joe Musgrove, who is about as much of a lock as possible. I know he was bad in that first start that became a meme for a lot of people. You know what I mean? Like this past year in spring training, it became a meme. The Dodgers were up by like 8 in the first inning. I really don't care, especially for a pitcher like Musgrove. It's not that he's testing out things, but his thing is that he's going to throw a bunch of different pitches. He has such a diverse repertoire of pitches. Obviously, what made him break out, I think, for a lot of people is that curveball is just disgusting. Especially as a put-away pitch when he decides to use it there. He gets people to chase all the time. It's amazing. 40% whiff rate also last year on his changeup. It feels like if something's not working, whether it be his fastball, which occasionally can get a little bit tatted up, every now and then, it can get tatted up. The fact that he makes up for it with just crazy movement. You never know what this guy's going to throw. And I've always kind of loved that Musgrove has like this body, this look, this name, dare I say, that everyone kind of looks at him and like they might assume, oh, he must be like this giant who overpowers you with stuff. That's not really what he does. He kind of toys with you just a tiny bit. You know what I mean? That's what I've always liked about watching him play. San Diego native, he's going to be fine. None of the savant data backs up anything. I don't care about his velo. I don't care that he's not getting the most amount of whiffs or strikeouts in the world. Bottom line is if people make contact, the only thing that seems to hurt him sometimes is when the curveball hangs a bit. But that's kind of just the occupational hazard for one word, for a curveball sometimes. And I'm super confident in Musgrove. So the top 3 guys I feel great about, which is why I've been stressing over the entirety of the offseason that, you know, one of my most obnoxious takes as a baseball person has been that I don't like when everyone's like, we need pitching. Because I think it's more in depth than that. I don't think it's just you need pitching. Everyone needs pitching, okay? You know what I mean? I need more money. You know what I mean? Like that doesn't say much to me, but how much money do I need? And in this case, how much pitching do the Padres need? I think because of those top 3, they're not dying for starting pitching, but they're certainly not clean, especially with the loss of Blake Snell. If they had Blake Snell still in this rotation, if he was still under contract for one more year, they would be like among one of the best in baseball, in my opinion, because of the fact that you have so much depth. And we got to talk about that depth because that's where things get interesting. We know who the top 3 are going to be. I would wager that Darvish might be the guy they throw out. You know, it is in Seoul, it is in Korea. Maybe that's the thing that they're looking at. Obviously, they're going to hype up Ha-Seong Kim a lot, and I understand where Yu Darvish is from. I understand that's different, but that might be something that they they try to highlight per se. I think that that's a possibility. And I think it's also a possibility that because of Joe Musgrove being kind of the heart and soul of the Padres team, especially when it comes to the pitching side, having him be your home debut makes more sense to me. So I think we may get a Darvish-Michael King duo to start off in Seoul this next coming week and a half, I guess. We got 12 days, man. We're right there. We're right there, folks. I can't freaking wait. And I can't wait to talk about the rest of the Padres starting rotation candidates and some of my personal thoughts, as well as some data on the rest of them, guys. But before we get into that, I got a new sponsor for you. That's right. Just the same way we've got all sorts of new pitchers for the Padres, we've also got some new sponsors, ladies and gentlemen. And first, I want to tell you about Factor. Look, man, I love food. And you listening, you probably love food too. You know why? Because you're human, and that's what humans do. We the animals and whatnot, like your raccoons and your bears, they live by eating. We literally live to eat. Shout out Over the Hedge if anyone gets that reference. But eating better, guys, is easy with Factor's delicious, ready-to-eat meals. Every fresh, never frozen meal is chef-crafted, dietitian-approved, and ready to go in just 2 minutes. You'll have over 35 different options to choose from every week, including Calorie Smart, Protein Plus, and Keto, varied meals and whatnot. Also, there are more than 60 add-ons to help you stay fueled up and feeling good all day. So what are you waiting for? 2-minute meals? You just throw that sucker in the oven, I mean, more or less, and then you're kind of good to go. They got pancakes. They got smoothies. So don't worry. You might have heard that thing, keto. Don't worry, folks. And also, eating healthy, a lot easier than sometimes you think it is. And they got really great different snacks that you can have. You got stuff for breakfast, there's midday stuff, there's late night snack stuff, there's no press, no mess, flexible for your schedule as well. Sign up and save on a bunch with Factor Meals. Head to factormeals.com/LockedOnMLB50. Locked On, not just Locked On MLB, Locked On MLB50, and use code LockedOnMLB to get 50% off. That's code LockedOnMLB at factormeals.com/LockedOnMLB to get 50% off. Go check it out. And just like that, we are back, ladies and gentlemen, here on Locked On Padres podcast. I mean, I got a lot of energy today. And my apologies for the lateness on the podcast. Don't get me wrong. It was just I don't know. I had to do a couple things this morning, and I also wanted to make sure I was ready for the pod, so I lost a little bit. And also, frankly, I'm enjoying some of my freedom at night to finish up some other work. I'm a little bit of a night person before the games start, because the games, y'all are getting game day recaps and everything like right afterwards. So be prepped for that. That's going to be a lot of fun. I cannot wait for the regular season to get started. But let's get started with the damn rest of the rotation. You know what I'm saying? And I think that there's so many areas to discuss. And first of all, I think that one thing that people have talked about a lot is, well, shouldn't the Padres just go out and sign someone? Should they sign someone like Michael Lorenzen? Should they sign someone like Eric Lauer? Should they sign someone like blah, blah, blah? Including some other guys, right? Well, Dennis Lin actually attested to this in The Athletic, writing, the Padres were one major league team that had talks with Hyunjin Ryu before the veteran lefty opted for an 8-year, 17 million won, 12.8 million by US dollars, deal to return to the Korea baseball organization's Hanwha Eagles. Hopefully I said that correctly. In terms of dollars, maybe Ryu and agent Scott Boras, shout out Boras, he's having a heck of an offseason, were aiming for the largest total guarantee. Maybe San Diego's interest was tempered significantly by Ryu's age, which is 37 this month, and 2 Tommy John surgeries. But the fact Ryu settled for an average annual value of $1.6 million would seem to reinforce that the Padres feel fairly confident about their in-house candidates for the back of the rotation. It's a great point, Lynn. That's how I think I feel about the Padres right now in terms of the idea of them making another signing, whether it be obviously a guy like Ryu, a guy like Eric Lauer, who just got signed by another team, I'm pretty sure, to a minor league deal, a guy like Michael Lorenzen, who's still out there. I'm a little bit curious to see who ends up getting that guy. I actually heard that, we're finally like finishing things up. Like Joey Votto just signed with the Blue Jays. Like we're finally, finishing up, hopefully. We're still looting. I don't know what's going on with Montgomery and Snell, but I agree. I think that the Padres are very much trying to just look at the rest of their young guys for once. So there's 2 things. Number one, I like the approach because what the Padres have been doing the past few years is spending big, trading big, going big on big stars only, and sacrificing depth, which sometimes is the issue. It's one of those things where it seems like they're a team that's been built for the playoffs rather than a team that's built for the regular season. It stinks. It stinks to hear. And most teams, I actually think, are a little bit more of the latter, where they're built for regular season success, i.e. those teams that I always talk about that never spend, but then they aren't a team that's going to go far in the postseason. So like Milwaukee, that's why they keep losing every year. They don't have the type of stars and players that will do well once you get to the postseason. You know what I mean? It's a lot easier for your random journeyman player to have that 360 on base that surprised everybody when he's going up against the A's and some other middling pitchers throughout the rest of the year. In the playoffs, you don't get that. So don't get me wrong, it's not the worst problem to have, but it is why the Padres have not won more than 89 games since AJ Preller took over. And the second point is this. I will admit it is possible that this lack of bringing in another person could be new ownership face kind of wanting to save some money. I do, however, think they've earned benefit of the doubt for at least one more season, but it is at least something that is worth bringing up. I'm not going to, I'm not going to lambast anyone who's like, hey, I think that Padres ownership is being cheap right now. That's totally fair because look around all of baseball, right? But in terms of the back end of the rotation, let's break it down. First, I want to talk about Matt Waldron. In my opinion, one of my least exciting candidates to make the Padres rotation. I'm sure he has a good chance of making the team, but doesn't have the best velocity and doesn't generate soft contact or ground ball stuff, which is my biggest thing. Is like, your Musgroves, your guys like that, they are able to make so much movement on their pitches and whatnot. And I just don't see that as much for Waldron. He did not impress me too much last year, and this is mean, but I kept getting him mixed up with Michael Waldron, a long-running bit of this podcast. He's a big writer in the whole Marvel Studios land, and for those who don't know, I also cover and pay attention to pop culture stuff a lot. But Waldron, look, is there more upside here? Maybe, but I'm just worried that it doesn't seem like scouts seem to act like this is a highly touted prospect. So with Waldron, I think the only thing that can happen is if he generates a few more whiffs on some of his pitches, maybe. If he's able to go deeper, if he's able to just one of those things I mentioned, whether it be velocity, which probably won't happen, or generating more contact into the ground, maybe that could happen. But one thing that is cool about him is he does throw a knuckleball, which I appreciate just because it's kind of an extinct thing. 26.9% of the time, in fact, is most used based on last year. So not the best in the world. He's worth keeping an eye on, but in my opinion, I just think that there are other guys that are more interesting for the Padres right now. That being said, you could see some Waldron appearances, whether it be likely as a starter, because injuries may happen and trades may happen, et cetera, et cetera. So I wouldn't rule out him being seen on this team, but out of all the candidates, probably the least interesting one for me. But there are a lot more guys than that, obviously. And now we got to talk about some guys who Stuff Plus, one metric if you like using Stuff Plus, which is, created by Unosaris, and he loves pushing that out around. Stuff Plus seems to like the estimated top sort of back-end starter candidates for the Padres, and that's Jhony Brito and Randy Vaśquez. Now, I'm higher on Brito. I think everybody is. Just to talk about them really quickly. Brito, unlike Waldron, really good velocity. That is one thing I like about him. And although we've heard this whole fastball velocity thing before, like, for those who remember, like Adrian Morejon, right? Like everyone was talking about him and, he's an international signing. Can he do some work for this team? He's got a sick name and he has really good velocity. But last year, I think you saw it's just not coming to fruition and it stinks. It really stinks. However, I think Brito's just a little bit different. He hasn't settled as much on a put-away pitch, but in terms of just his overall numbers, he was okay last year. He was a fine back-end guy. Like I said, he throws pretty hard. He's able to generate at least a little bit of ground balls, which is nice. 19.4 strikeout percentage isn't great, right? And walk rate of 7.5%, not amazing, but 4.28 ERA, and that wasn't as far off from as expected. He was okay. I think that him tinkering in his second season of Major League showcasing could provide something. His fastball, actually, opponents only hit 163 against it. But most interestingly, like I was mentioning before, it doesn't seem to have a true put-away pitch. 12.6% his sinker, 19.1% his changeup, 18.3 his curveball, and 12.8 his fastball. No, don't get me wrong. There can be benefit in that, the fact that you don't know what's coming, but those pitches on their own have seemed to be super effective so far. And obviously Brito, one of the other players acquired in the Juan Soto trade. But in terms of the back end, he's my 4 right now, or my 4 or 5, whichever one you want to put it. He's one of them for me because I think that he's had some success. He's still young enough. And like I said, I like the velo. And I like the fact that he's not getting super roughed up. And at the very minimum, looks like a guy that can at least throw some dang innings, right? Like, I think that that's going to be important for the Padres for a lot of this season until they get a better grasp on what exactly is what their team is, whether or not they're going to be competitive. Maybe, you want to see how the rest of their prospects pan out, how they look in the minors. But in terms of all the stats, look, he's not the worst in the world. I've seen worse, and he's had some success in the minors. I don't think there's a lot of upside here, but maybe working with Ruben Niebla. He's looked decent enough in spring training. Not that means literally anything, but Brito, definitely a guy that I think is likely to make the starting pitching rotation. And look, Stuff Plus likes them and kind of has projected them similar to the way Seth Lugo and Michael Wacha, especially Lugo, performed last year. So I'm super cool on Jhony Brito. But we're not done, guys. We still got some other pitchers to talk about, and we're going to get through them real quick because I don't want to keep you busy all day. It's Friday. You got to go celebrate. Maybe you got to go see Dune 2. I mean, I know that's what everyone's seeing. And by the way, you should. It was freaking amazing. It really was. But if instead you're not all about that pop culture stuff and instead you're only about sports and whatnot, well, I got you covered with this next ad read. It's Amazon Fire TV, your sports destination, folks. Live games to highlights to in-depth analysis. Fire TV offers amazing viewing experiences with smart TVs, as well as the Fire TV stick that you can plug into your existing TV that provides access to millions of movies, TV episodes, as well as free and live TV, whether it's opening weekend for baseball or we got March Madness coming up. What's Caitlin Clark going to do? Is she going to ascend to GOAT status after Iowa wins? If Iowa wins, my bad. You're going to have to get yourself ready because you're going to want a Fire TV, ladies and gentlemen. And here's the thing. Look, fun fact, my friend of mine loves his Fire Stick, and I still remember, I will never forget how sad he was. We mysteriously just lost it one day. We were in his living room, and it vanished. Folks, just if you want some Javier Reyes lore, no one found it. I don't know what happened. It's like been years, and no one knows what happened to this thing. No one threw it. It was just on the couch once, and then it vanished. Like, what does that mean? I don't know. Leave what your thoughts are in the comments. But let me tell you guys, Fire TV is also something that recently added Fire TV channels to deliver a constant supply of the latest videos from your favorite sports brands, all for free, including us over here at Locked On. That's right. Even if it's not Locked On Padres, they got you covered with all sorts of Locked On channels, whether it be Mavericks, whether it be MLB, whether it be NBA, whether it be NHL, whatever you want, they got you covered. It's going to be great, guys. Going to be great. Not to mention they've got news, entertainment, gaming, travel, all sorts of stuff with Fire TV channels. Trust me on this. To learn more, visit www.amazon.com/LockedOnFireTV to learn more. And just like that, we are back, folks, here in the waning moments of the Locked On Padres podcast for this beautiful, beautiful Friday. Beautiful Friday. What can I say? I don't know. I'm in a good mood. I'm in a very good mood. I don't know why. It's probably the jacket, right? It's got to be the jacket. That's got to be what it is. But anyway, let's talk about the remainder of the pitchers. The second guy that the Padres acquired aside from Brito is Randy Vaśquez, who Stuff Plus seems to like, but admittedly, I'm not super high on him. And I know some people might initially say, well, hey, 2.87 ERA last year, over 37 2/3. Yeah, that is pretty good. But 4.98 FIP. And a 5.27 expected ERA, especially for a guy who doesn't necessarily have the best peripherals in the world. In fact, I could barely even find him on Savant. Like, I had to dive a little bit deeper into him. Doesn't seem to be the type of guy that we, frankly, know enough about yet. Because it seems like in that sample size, he got pretty lucky last year. But I don't know enough about him. I don't really know what is going to be the situation with Randy Vaśquez this year. Now, I think that he's a guy that you might want to trot out. I actually would be very curious to see over the course of the rest of spring training whether they settle on him or someone like Matt Waldron, who we talked about before, because I really don't know. I actually don't know. I think that there's a lot of questions when it comes to that fifth spot, like who's going to make it, because I really do think that they're kind of not all over the place isn't the right way to put it, but I do think that I'm blanking right now. Give me 1 second. Give me 1 second. We're going to do good. I think that Vaśquez, can be effective in some capacity, but I just feel like it's between him and Waldron. I don't know if either one of them have set themselves apart all that much. Like I said, at least with Waldron, I think that with Waldron, there might be, I don't know, there's just a feeling that I think that Waldron deserves a little bit more time. That's just me. I could be totally wrong though. Again, Randy Vaśquez, kind of a little bit of the wild card of this bunch that I just admittedly don't know too much. Don't have too many opinions that are different than most of the consensus things out there. But that's just me. One pitcher that I do think I've had my opinions on before, who I've been a little bit down on, is Pedro Avila, who everybody saw last year. He actually had a couple moments. I remember I believe he was the pitcher that followed up Jackson Wolf when he made that debut for us last year. Obviously, one of the pieces that was used in the trade with, I believe, Pittsburgh for G-Man Choi and Rich Hill. Pedro Avila, I'm more down on him compared to everybody else. And the reason is because every time I've been asked about him is we're talking about starter. And as a starter, I don't know if he has it really. And I'm not trying to be a jerk, but that's just where I come from in terms of Pedro Avila. Now, I will say though, I do think he could be really good as a reliever, which is why I think he's going to make the team. Last year in 24 and 2/3 innings, 1.46 ERA, 2.85 FIP, and a 28.3% strikeout rate in the reliever role. And in total, over the sample size from not just last year, 28 and 2/3 innings, 3.2 FIP, 28.2% K rate. So he's succeeded in that role. He seems to limit hard contact, and his pitches drop, by the way, which is one advantage he has. He's not the type of guy that get you chasing on some slider that, goes inside and then outside across the plate. That's not his thing, but the curve has a huge drop. I'm talking like up there in the highest percentiles among other major league pitchers. So the curve can be really effective. I think that's what made him succeed really well there. And like I said, he limits hard contact. He gets a decent strikeout rate in that reliever role, and especially with that curveball. So that's really exciting. Frankly, I'm kind of wondering, could he be like a Nick Martinez light? Now, don't get me wrong. Nick Martinez, and he's one of those guys that I was also wrong about. I'm still convinced like his brother commented on my channel and made fun of me after my initial reaction to the signing. But Martinez was kind of this guy who fit a bunch of different situations. That's why I'm kind of talking about Avila, where, yeah, he could be a starter, right? Like if you need one in a pinch, if, say, one of our stars gets hurt, if something's happening, sure. I don't think he's a closer, right? The way that Nick Martinez occasionally was used as a closer every now and then, like maybe I think like 3 or 4 times, I think. Like in the 2022 season, I feel like they used him as a closer a couple times when they didn't have Hader yet. So that could be a thing. But if you need to, he could be a starter, but I don't think he's nearly as effective. I think as a long inning reliever, man, he seems to excel, especially based on the differences between his starting pitching and the relief pitching performance, like I mentioned. I think that opponents seeing a crazy drop in that curveball out of nowhere after facing, let's say that they're facing a guy like Darvish, and then all of a sudden they have to face this guy who throws a curveball that goes up into the heavens to Mount Olympus, and then it goes back to the pits of Tartarus. That could make for an interesting player. So I think he'll make the team for that reason alone. I'm not high on him as a starter, though. I just don't think that he's got the type of juice to be able to go. I think he was a little bit inefficient in outings as a starter last year. I think he got a little bit lucky. I think his control dropped a little bit. But I do like him as a relief pitcher. And who knows, with more time, maybe he can evolve a little bit. He is 27, so it's not like he's super young. But I think he could get a little bit better. So shouts to Pedro Avila. I do like him for making the team and potentially as a reliever, although I wouldn't be surprised to see him in a starting pitching role. Now we got to talk about prospects really quickly. We're going to get through these guys really quickly because I've mentioned many times I am not a prospect guru. I'm not the best at analyzing this stuff. There are plenty of other people who do a lot better than me. But that being said, the Padres making that trade for Juan Soto, in my opinion, was really big because it means that all these guys I'm about to talk about, they're like options. They're just possibilities, right? And one of them is Dylan Lesko. He's been talked about for a while. In my opinion, the most irrelevant out of everybody for now. I just think he needs more time. He's still super young. He's impressed a lot of people in the early going. There's a reason why he's on the top 100 for prospects in Major League Baseball for a lot of outlets. Don't pay attention to his unimpressive ERA. There's a lot of other things under the hoods that seem to be exciting people, including reportedly working on adding some new pitches. He's also recovering from injury, but he's the most far off. I don't think he makes any appearance this year. Frankly, I'm kind of wondering if he makes it next year. By some approximations, 2026 is what people are expecting. So let's go. Not a guy for now, but down the line could be really interesting. And now you might be wondering, well, Javi, then why aren't we signing people if one of our prospects is so far behind? Because he's not the only one. That's right. Despite all the trades, the Padres, for some reason, have a huge farm system that's really exciting. The next one, Robby Snelling. It seems like out of all the guys I'm going to mention, the highest upside of basically anyone on the Padres this year, dare I say, outside just their regular starting 3 pitchers. There's a chance that Robby Snelling could be one of those like breakout prospects that maybe flashes some stuff early. He's still a little bit young. He still has some things to work on, especially with his control. His control by some scouting grades is a little bit lower, but 1.56 ERA and 4 AA starts. He's progressing quickly, which is exciting, but I don't want them to rush him, which is why I love the trade, what they got back in. So I don't love that they traded Soto, but I like that they got a lot of pitching back. That way, what have the Padres been doing? Every time someone's exciting, boom, promoted. And outside Tatis, that has not worked out. So I like that they're kind of in a position where they can wait, and dare I say, be forced to wait and check out Randy Vaśquez, who I don't know enough about. Check out Brito. Check out Pedro Avila. All those guys. Matt Waldron included. Wait on Snelling, but I have to admit, having the depth is what makes me more excited about waiting on these guys. It's exciting to be able to wait. And then last one that was acquired in the Juan Soto trade, Drew Thorpe. I think he's another one that could make some appearance this year. The strikeout stuff by itself is pretty impressive. Now, I think that some people would argue that some of the competition he faced wasn't the best, but I think he could be a really good back end guy immediately. I do wonder about his upside, though. I don't know if there's higher upside with him. And the reason for that is because he's not exactly a high velocity guy. His fastball is not fast. It's kind of his weakest pitch. 92 miles per hour. That's kind of like the average sometimes. And obviously that's not exactly exciting. Maybe 30 years ago it was exciting, but not now. So I don't know if there's longer term upside for him to be as good as what I think they're hoping Lesko and Snelling are as pitchers of the future. Right, guys that could be like the faces of the rotation once Darvish is older, and then Michael King maybe leaves or whatever, gets older, and same thing for Joe Musgrove, right? I think they're hoping on those guys to be the pillars of their rotation, or at least pillars to rely on coming into mulling out the rest of the rotation down the line. Thorpe, I think right now, could be a really good 5. He's more of a trickster type rather than overpowering, as alluded to with that velocity thing, which I'll always assume means lower upside. That's just a natural inclination of mine. However, on the other hand, look at Joe Musgrove. He's not a big fastball velocity guy. We just talked about that at the top of this pod. So maybe that's what his thing will be. I want to see if he progresses a little bit more, but the strikeouts are encouraging. And I know that even if it's not stuff that people think will play at a major league level because of the velocity. Bottom line is he got a lot of strikeouts. So can he be a 5? I do. And I actually think I wouldn't be surprised if he makes his debut for the team in the major leagues sooner rather than later. And I know that the Yankees loved him. I know Yankees fans loved him. Steve Granado, who was on the show a few months back when we talked about the Soto trade, he loves Drew Thorpe. He thinks that this guy has really high strikeout potential and could be that hidden ingredient thing that people aren't talking about enough that ends up making the trade look pretty decent for the Padres down the line. So that means a lot. And Steve was around a bunch of minor league stuff in the Yankees organization. Like, that's who we called games for. So shouts to Steve. Last couple guys, we're going to blaze through this really quickly. Jairo Iriarte. A lot of people like him. Flashiest stuff, dare I say, of the bunch in terms of this past spring. And as noted by many, the series in Seoul might have forced the Padres to do some roster cuts. I know some people were a little bit surprised that he got cut and reassigned. I understand that. Not cut, you know what I mean. Like, didn't make the major league team. I think that's because of the series in Seoul, because they're starting their season earlier than other people. They kind of have to trim the roster a lot faster than people. And in my opinion, though, Iriarte, I just think that he forced their hand a little bit in terms of right now. He's still super young. He's just 22 years old, so don't freak out. But I think a lot of people are excited by the uptick in his velocity over the past few months. And like I said, he could be called up later on. I just don't think it's going to happen yet. He was working out the biomechanics lab in Peoria, so there's a lot of exciting stuff here. But similar to Snelling, he does need to work on command. He's smaller than some other guys. From what I've seen, he's about like 160, I believe, compared to like the 180, of guys like Thorpe and guys like what's his face, Snelling and Lesko, like, seem to have a bit better build physically that scouts seem to like more. But again, he is a guy that I think could be called up later on, but he's young. And I think that they just decided, you know what, give us some more experience. We like what he's showing so far. Might be an interesting guy down the line. It might even be a guy that I wouldn't be surprised if is an impact bullpen guy. I think that if he isn't a great starter, like, this guy might be awesome in the bullpen. I could actually see that as his future too. So that's really exciting. Then another guy, Ryan Berger, pitched well in high A and impressed in double A. No one's really talking about him. Good ERA in both. And I'm intrigued. I actually think that it says a lot that he wasn't one of the guys that was sent down. 24 years old, so a little bit older, but a little bit older than Iriarte. I mean, obviously 24 is not. Isn't that weird saying like, oh, that 24-year-old? Meanwhile, I'm 27. Like, I'm older than this guy. You know what I mean? Like, it's so funny to say that. But Berger, I want to see a little bit more. But I think he's been one of those low-key rising guys. And there's some people who actually think he's one of the more underrated, both him and Iriarte. I've seen guys like Eric Cross, who does a lot of prospect analysis, say that guys like Iriarte might be some of the most underrated pitching prospects in all of baseball, Berger included. So I think personally, all of it come down to it, I think it's between Waldron and Vaśquez for the initial opening day roster. And then I do think that a guy like Drew Thorpe could be someone who comes up sooner rather than later. There might be a lot of call-ups this year, guys. And I know that that's like not as exciting as some people might think, but I think it is. I think that it's really fascinating that the Padres, like, I could see all of those guys with the exception of Lesko. And yeah, like, I think besides Lesko, all of the guys I've talked about in today's episode could make some starting pitching appearances for the Padres this year. I know I'm like stating the obvious there, but I don't think that it's because they're like desperate for pitching. I think that's a good thing. I think that they have all these guys because they all have some interesting different upside, whether it be prospects, whether it be, you know, filling innings guys, which are still important, right? Remember Jake Arrieta and Vincent Vaśquez? My God, that was a rough time. I don't think that they're going to be in that situation this year, especially if the top three in the rotation stays healthy. So me personally, I think it's going to come down to Vaśquez and Waldron, and then Brito as the fourth guy. So I think that's what it's going to look like for now. I actually think Iriarte was one that just a few weeks ago, I probably was not going to lie. I probably would have said, I think he's going to make the opening day roster, and I would have been wrong, but I'd keep an eye on that. I think Snelling is a midseason call up. I do. I think Snelling's a midseason call-up. I think Thorpe has a little bit more experience and a little bit more strikeout potential, and I think that they might like him as a fifth guy, while they want to give Snelling a little bit more time. And of course, depending on how Brito and Vaśquez work, maybe they'll take even longer. So I think they don't want to like use up, you know, the options and get their clock started necessarily so soon, when you might have some guys who we don't know yet what they are, right? Why would you force your hand so quickly? Don't do what you did with CJ Abrams on the pitching side, i.e., you have Ha-Seong Kim. Yeah, he was really rough his rookie year as a hitter, but he had some interesting stuff that he was good at with his defense. And what they do, they called up CJ Abrams. And then what happened? Ha-Seong Kim was awesome and became the kind of beloved hero that he is today. So give it some time. Let's see what Waldron, Vaśquez, and Brito are capable of. And then if it's really, really bad, then maybe you bring up Drew Thorpe. And then depending on how that goes, a midseason call-up, depending on how well off the Padres are in terms of their overall record, I could see Robby Snelling as well. And in terms of free agents, I don't really see anything right now. I know that there's Michael Lorenzen out there. You know what I mean? And maybe one of the guys that I've mentioned on this podcast today may or may not be coming on this podcast at some point. So that's a little tease for you. But in terms of the near future, that's what I think is the case for the Padres starting pitching rotation heading into this year. I think it's really exciting. I think it's really exciting that outside Darvish and Musgrove, a lot of unknowns and stuff we haven't seen before. And that actually can be a good thing, especially when you have some stars already on your team. You've got a lot of talent. Don't give up. I really do think that there could be some interesting stuff with this Padres team. And I like that they have options. You know, last year when they called up Jackson Wolf, it feels like you guys are just a little desperate and you kind of have to. This year, if they call up someone, I think it's because they might be excited about them, not because they're desperate. Again, because of that trade for Michael King, Brito, and Vaśquez. I think they're a little bit in the driver's seat. There's not as much panic. And I think, as Dennis Lin talked about, the reason why they didn't bid up more for Hyunjin Ryu, I think they're like, you know what? Fine. We like our guys. We're okay with fielding what we have, at least for now in the early going, for a team that wants to monitor its budget. And in my opinion, they should, because next year's free agent class is a lot more stacked. But what do I know? I'm just the idiot wearing a Padres jacket with Pac-Man and Tatis bobbleheads in front of me. So what do I know? But with that all being said, everybody, that about does it for today's Chunky Boy episode Friday of the Locked On Padres podcast. Be sure to check out the podcast wherever you get your podcasts from. Follow me on Twitter at Javipeno, Javiipeno. Forgot to say at the top of the show, but DM me. either at the Jalapeno account or at LO_Padres, or leave some YouTube comments. We'll be reacting to those on Monday, talking about the latest news and stuff. Maybe we'll get some news finally about Blake Snell this weekend. That would be cool. I will absolutely talk about that. And no, it won't be with the Padres, but still, at this point, who isn't curious where this guy's going to sign? So look forward to that on Monday. I usually record that a little bit Monday morning. I am on the East Coast. That's like, 9:30, 10 a.m. So get your comments and questions in by then, and they might make an appearance on Monday's show. Really, really fun stuff, guys. But until next time, stay safe, and of course, stay faithful. My Friar Faithful homies, take care.